The third step on top of that is the secret sauce, which is just you. It's who you are. That's like your authentic self, your authentic truth. And if you combine all those together, that's how you reach authentic success.
All right, so Wes, welcome to the 9th episode of In Full Effect podcast. It's going so quickly. Every week we're recording new episodes and we're already at 9. That means we're over 2 months in. Thank you everybody for all the support so far. It's been amazing and it's actually quite encouraging to keep going. Today, I have a close friend of mine that I met here in Vietnam over 2 years ago. Wes is a owner of Omega Digital, an agency focused on digital marketing that through deep data research turned everything into a high quality strategy. So if you need anyone to elevate your brand or come up with strategy ideas for your business, he's the right wizard for you. So Wes, we met over 2 years ago here in Vietnam, I think. Is it 2 years? We met through my business partner, Kevin, a friend of yours as well. Since then, we've been working on some projects together, such as networking events and some different corporate jobs. But then you moved to the States, so that's on a hold, but you're coming back soon. So that's very exciting. And the reason that I actually bring you on is we actually, oddly enough, have a lot of common interests or things going on in our life, such as I call it ADHD. I don't know if you still go by that, but we have similar interests like coffee, doing business in general, podcasting. We're very focused on self-development and time management, and there's so many more things. So for the listeners, we actually had to stop talking to each other for the last week because every time we got excited for this podcast, we started talking about topics over and over. And it's like, hold on, we need to keep this for the episode. Like literally the half an hour before this podcast, same thing. It's like, oh, so this and this. And like, hold on, let's literally start recording first and then we can talk about it. So yeah, thanks Wes for coming on. Super exciting. You're all the way on the other side of the world right now in San Diego.
Yep.
Cool. San Diego, 14-hour difference. He got up early for me. He says so, but I don't know if I believe that. It's evening for me. So after this one, I'll go to bed. I'm so excited for this one. Welcome.
Yeah. So I'm Wes Jackson. I'm CEO of Omega Digital, which is a digital marketing agency in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. I'm originally from Southern California, but I spent 1/6 of my life in Vietnam. And I've actually been on a path away from digital marketing and more into the realm of personal development.
Nice. That's perfectly down the alley of this podcast. So that's super exciting. What's the reason that you that you had to go through that path for self-development?
I came to the realization that throughout my life, people seem to come to me for advice, and I seem to give them good advice because then they come back to me later on and tell me that. So I'm basically only really responding to what has been told to me over time throughout my life by multiple people. And so I'm kind of just seeing how far that goes. And it is something that I'm very passionate about as well. On top of that, I like being of service to people. I've always liked helping people. And I'm really fond of sharing my knowledge in particular with people, because I've always loved sharing since a very young age, and I like teaching as well. So I think being a coach in that sense kind of ticks all those boxes for me in what can constitute, I guess, my life's purpose and passion. So I really like helping people out, and the more I can help, the better in terms of both depth and width. So my dream, I guess, is to spread my messages as far and as wide as possible, to help people heal themselves and then heal the world as much as possible. And this is all through the lens of personal development and self-development, self-help, whatever you'd like to call it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been myself busy with self-development for quite a while as well, even from a young age for an average person. Very interesting because I'm probably one of those people that comes knocking on your door every 2 minutes asking for things, because like I said before, we had struggles in our life, like both of us. You've been through them a little bit earlier than I have, so funny enough, when I come knocking on your door, or like talk about something with you, it's like, hey, I've been through that. Let me like elaborate on that and like see how this works for you. And that's why I'm again super excited for this episode. This episode might take 3 hours probably because I know how we can just keep talking and talking over so many subjects. So is self-development right now your main thing that you're focused on, or what is your day-to-day at the moment?
Yeah, so I would say in terms of like a percentage or a ratio, and in terms of dividing the day up, I would say probably 50%, maybe more at this point, because it's like influencing my reading now as well, because I'm starting to read like how to apply a lot of these things in different content formats. So I would say maybe 60% focused around this personal development work now. And then the rest is focused on my existing, largely Google Ads or paid search engine marketing efforts through Omega Digital.
Okay, cool. Are you the only one working for Omega Digital right now, or you still have a team running here in Vietnam?
It's just me right now, mainly working with US subcontracts. And then when needed, I will work with my vetted group of freelancers or partner agencies, such as you guys at K Collective. But yeah, it's largely a skeleton crew, I suppose, that I work with. It's pretty nice, honestly, being a captain of your own ship in that regard.
True, true. You're coming back when to Vietnam exactly?
Probably in June.
Nice. And is the plan to keep doing what you're doing, or what's the idea there?
Yeah, as I just continue to hope to shrink that percentage more and more. So I do less and less of my digital marketing and more content creation.
Cool. Yeah, because I think you're very busy with something big as well, but I'll leave that up to you. But let's get into it a little bit, eh? Let's start with the big questions so we can get the conversation rolling. What are for you your dreams and aspirations? And maybe because you have plenty, what are your big dreams and aspirations?
Well, so on a personal level, it would be to continue learning every day. So it's probably part of why, since health is one of my core values, I worry sometimes about losing my mind or memory, so to speak, whether it's through Alzheimer's or dementia. So I really value my memory and prize it as well, because I have quite a good long-term one, quite a clear one. So my recall is pretty good on a long-term level. So I'd like to continue to cultivate that and keep that going until old age. So that's one of my aspirations and dreams on a personal level, because then I can continue, if I'm able to continue to recall very well, I'm able to continue to share that knowledge with people. It's probably part of why I feel compelled to produce something also that can withstand the test of time. So something written, essentially, which will be in the works later on. So I guess that's one of my dreams, is definitely to write a book. That's another personal goal of mine, but also tied into my career, I guess you could call it. So that's a professional aspiration as well. I'd love to be able to make a living through my content creation, and we'll see if that's possible. Basically, if enough people resonate with it, and if I'm able to be strategic and smart enough, and my partner that I'm involved with this venture in is lenient enough in his stance towards advertising, because we're trying to stay crowdfunded in this content creation project, which may only be feasible in the short term, because I would like to make a living off of it. And I think so would he, probably deep down. Maybe, yeah. I'm not sure. This is a developing conversation. Yeah. And then so those will be my goals and aspirations on both a personal and professional level.
Nice. So you mentioned already that like on a daily basis, you're actually like doing a lot of research. So to actually build up to that long term. So for you, it's not necessarily one set point in time that or one goal that you can physically reach, right? It's literally something that you want to be doing for your whole life and maintain that.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I would chalk that up as the growth mindset. Essentially, you're always learning. Retirement in the Western or American sense, at least, is kind of an illusion. I think in order to keep your mind young and healthy, you need to continue to work with it and practice with it. So you need to engage your mind or engage mentally with the world on a daily basis in order to keep it. I mean, it's like a muscle, right? Like working out, you need to keep it in shape, and that requires you to, read, learn through some sort, whether it's through, podcasts like this, audiobooks, reading articles, reading books, watching YouTube videos on educational content. It doesn't matter what form your learning takes. What matters is that you keep doing it. Not every single day of your life. You can take breaks, but it's something that should be ideally baked in probably to your daily routine.
Yeah. If you compare it to a muscle, do you see like a difference for yourself when you first started actively learning things, the way you absorb stuff now? Is it like way easier for you right now than it used to be?
Yeah, it's funny that no one's asked me that before, and I've never actually thought or felt my way through that question. So I just did that right now after you said that. And I definitely do realize a difference now. I'm able to synthesize and integrate different concepts that are seemingly different or unrelated on the surface. I'm able to integrate them together much faster and seamlessly than I used to, where I would be like grappling with these kind of concepts for quite a while. It takes much less time now for me to do that. So it's pretty great because the speed at which I learn is much faster than it used to be before. So that's another benefit, because it kind of gives you like that compound interest return effect, right? So if you continue to put in this work on a daily basis, if you do that every single day, and if you imagine that and you stretch it out far and wide over the span of several years, imagine how much you will learn if you multiply, 365 days in a year times like 5 years, right? If you've been on a self kind of growth journey for 5 years where you're dedicating yourself to learning every single day, that's like 1750. It's nearly 1800 days where you've learned something new. And so that's like 1800 bits of information that you've now stored inside, let's call it the hard drive that is your brain, right? So for you to then recall at future points in your life. And this is why people say like never stop like reading, for example, used to be like the old mantra. But, with what we know now about different learning styles, it can be listening or watching. Never stop watching, never stop reading, never stop listening. No matter what mode you prefer in terms of learning, just never stop learning. Yeah, the big mantra at the end of the day.
I noticed that I've been through like different phases where I found more focus once in a while, or let's say that work came in and I used it as an excuse to not learn as much anymore. But every time I want to get back into it, it's like going to the gym. The first few times it's like a struggle, and you have to pick up the momentum of getting the aches away and really start enjoying it again. Or it's about building routines and consistency as well. I think it's very important. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit later, about consistency, because I think for learning, that is one of the biggest aspects to effectively do that. But what I want to know first from you is actually, since I started this podcast, I knew I wanted to get you on at one point, but I want to see your view on what's your full potential. How do you see full potential in your eyes?
So I have, I guess, it's actually like a Buddhist mindset. Honestly, it's called the beginner's mindset. So I guess what I would say then in regards to, is this my full potential? This isn't even my final form, essentially. But it's true, though, I'm only just getting started. But in reality, you're only ever just getting started on a daily basis. There's always something to do each day. There's a task that is at hand on a daily basis, usually, or at least there should be. You should have a form to your day somewhat, at least one thing to do on your plate every single day, one task to conquer, one obstacle in your way for you to get past or get through, so that you continue to, flex your skills. I guess listening to these words, that they'll only take you higher, essentially, right? So if you continue to always striving in learning something new every day, This is how we continue to have potential in the first place. You want to always have potential. You don't want to ever reach your full potential, because then that means you're done. It's all, not downhill from there, but it's all down from there, right? You don't want to peak and then that's just the last peak you've ever hit. I mean, that opens up the question, right? The conversation. Are we aware of our peaks when we're hitting them? Or do we counter that kind of negative mindset, right? Where we have this kind of fixed linear view of time by cultivating like this abundance mindset. And that way we continue to learn. And if you're comparing it with this abundance mindset where you see that there's always new opportunities basically being created in your life when you're learning, because these are opportunities that are created with the abundance mindset to apply said learning. And then through this learning and this teaching, this applying your learning, we actually teach ourselves as well, and thus better learn the subject and further our cycle of learning. Because in reality, like when we learn a bit of information and we actually learn it, it doesn't just, go into the back of your head forever and then come out randomly. It kind of swirls around in there through a cycle. And as you go about your life, which is, a life cycle, it might come up. And so the more, like, as I said, bits of information that you store in there in your head, if you continue to learn every day, the more opportunities you have to share with other people in your life, and thus, I guess, form connections with them. I mean, learning is a very profound and compound skill in your arsenal or your tool set, your toolkit, right, of life. Man, I feel like a broken record, but if people master just this one thing, if you can like wake up every day eager to learn, no matter what happens in your day, I think you'd be pretty solid and pretty set throughout life, especially if you then apply that knowledge that you learn.
I resonate with a lot what you're saying. First of all, you don't know what you don't know. So when you start learning, you see a topic and you think, oh, once I have that topic, I know it all. But because you've been learning certain things, you learn that there is more than just that topic, for example. Especially when you learn a skill, it's like when you just start out, you feel like on top of the world because you conquered your first hurdles. And then you're like, oh, I'm the best, I know it all. And then like 0.5% of what actually is out there. So you don't know what you don't know. The last thing you said was like, yes, you can learn. And I think then we can start splitting it up between knowledge, wisdom, but also act upon it. And I think acting upon what you learn, applying it is also very important.
Well, I think it's really important to have a mentor, which is ironic because I don't think I could say I've ever really had one. But I know this is something that everyone else talks about, so it must have at least some truth to it. That having a mentor is important because honestly, learning from your own mistakes is one thing, right? Kinesthetic learning by doing. Yeah, it's a very powerful way to learn things, but it can also be a very painful one. And I'm not saying that we should live a life void of pain and struggle and suffering, because honestly, that'd be probably a little boring, because life honestly is suffering at the end of the day. And that's why it's funny, because you mentioned that, right? Like getting past that first hurdle, we're celebrating so much, right? And then a lot of the times people get stuck after that first step where they've taken this first mighty step, right? This like great leap forward. And then instead of looking back and like they celebrate the look back first, right? And then they look forward and they see they maybe get a little short glimpse of the countless other obstacles just like it that lay in their path forward. And a lot of people get really scared of that. And this is why it is important to have a mentor as well, right? You have someone that's there who has been through some form of what you've been through. You know that they've been through something at least that has given them some sort of valuable wisdom or experience that they might distill into you if you stick around them long enough and listen to what they have to say and listen through what they've done as well. Like decipher what they have done and analyze it at a meta level, a meta contextual level. So if you analyze not just reading what they're doing, right? Don't just read what these people say or listen to what they say. You need to actually analyze what your mentors are doing themselves. This is why having one is also really important. You have kind of an archetype to go off of success, right? You have a proven model that works. Everyone has a different path to success that works individually for them. So you can't just copy these people, your mentors. You can only take bits and pieces of their guidance and can create this patchwork quilt, right? To kind of cover yourself in and then to carry forward on your own journey. Because what works for someone else is not going to be exactly what works for you. And that's why it's important to simply get guidance from mentors, but not emulate them completely. You don't reach success, by being somebody else. You reach success by being yourself. That's your at least authentic success, right? You can reach great peaks and pinnacles of financial success just by doing simply what you're good at. But that might not be what's, authentic for you. It might not bring you joy and fulfillment and purpose and meaning in your life just because you're good at it. I mean, I'm a case in point right there, right? I'm good at digital marketing. I enjoy it, so to speak, to an extent. But at the end of the day, it's not, what scratches that itch, so to speak, right? That is left, that void in my life where I feel most alive. And that is of being of service within the personal development realm. And so, and so that's why it's important to have a mentor, because someone who learning from someone else's mistakes is a much faster way than learning from your own. And it's something that I would push most people towards. And people like having that kind of idea of a safety net, someone to go to in times of need or crisis, that's always there to kind of give you some sort, there's always those people in your life, right, that you tend to gravitate towards when you need them. Someone who always says those right words that you need to hear when you're in a certain sort of maybe state of uncertainty. We probably all have that person or people in our lives kind of that serve as that, that rock, right? That lighthouse in the storm. Those are our mentors.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask, for a lot of people, it's very difficult to find a mentor, right? Especially like what you just said, it's true, you gravitate towards people. But let's say you start into a new realm of something, a new job, or somebody wants to deep dive into self-development themselves, but their close environment is not really receptive to that. How can someone really find the right mentor? And I talked about this with Werner, episode 4. There's a lot of noise around us, a noise that distracts us from what's right, what's wrong, noise that literally blind us finding the right path. So how do you find the right mentor for you?
Yeah, so I would say it all starts honestly with your own personal core values, right? So if you're making decisions based off, if you know your core values and then you're making decisions within your life, both big and small, on both a daily and long-term basis, centered around your core values, you will manifest things and the universe will manifest things in your life as a kind of reflection of that. So what you put out, the universe will reflect. So if you have discovered, your core values and you're now living a life oriented around them, you'll be more likely to attract the things that you need most in your life as a result. So if you're living your authentic truth, so to speak, as a result of, knowing your core values, this inner knowing, this kind of self-confidence of inner knowing that you now have as a result of all this stuff about yourself. So I'm talking not just core values actually there, but also strengths. So if you know just those two things, you'll have a pretty solid compass, so to speak, to navigate yourself towards those paths through the noise. Because you're right, just like you and Werner said in episode 4, there's a lot of noise out there in this world and a lot of distractions, especially in regards to media, right? When we're consuming content, even within the personal development realm, it's very easy to get distracted because a lot of the times we might be consuming this content on a platform that is just full of other distractions, or we're using an internet connection, and thus we always have a countless number of distractions waiting at the palm of our hand, at our fingertips at any given moment, at any given day. And when you have this access to anything you could want at any point in time, it is very distracting. And so I would say knowing yourself is step one of seeing the paths. That's what you need to see the paths through the noise, is that in order to actually walk the paths and stay on them, that's self-discipline. So you need inner knowing and you need self-discipline, or self-knowledge and self-discipline. If you have those two things, you pretty much have most of the recipe for success within your own individual life. The third step on top of that is the secret sauce, which is just you. It's who you are. That's like your authentic self, your authentic truth. And if you combine all those together, that's how you reach authentic success.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. And now you mentioned self-discipline. My next question was going to be, besides that, you already mentioned 50-60% is learning and 40% is what you do for a living or live life. What are steps for you to keep your self-discipline on a daily basis? Like literally, what do you do when you wake up, and how do you keep your focus on your goals? Because I definitely struggle with keeping focus and being disciplined and consistent. So what do you do, and do you have tips for people to be self-disciplined?
Sure. I'll answer both of those questions. So what I'm doing actively on like a daily basis to reach my goals, I've been talking all about learning every single day. So if I didn't do that on a daily basis, I wouldn't really be walking the walk, would I? With that said, I read about 2 to 3 hours every day on largely on self-development, all kinds of content in all types of forms, whether it's a podcast, whether it's reading articles, whether it's reading books or summaries of books, even if I don't feel like I have the time or the desire to read an entire book on some sort of subject. I'll read a summary of it instead, or a Wikipedia article, because I think it's more important to kind of be a generalist, or, as they used to call it, a Renaissance man, so to speak, a jack of all trades. It's important to have foundational knowledge of a large amount of subjects, because that's how we're able to pull more, I think, profound insights together. Because if we have little bits and pieces of knowledge and we integrate them from all these different little subjects, we're able to make something pretty unique on a pretty consistent basis. The more, the larger that pool and the more diverse that pool of knowledge is. So the more diverse it is and the larger it is and the deeper it is, the more chances we have to, I guess, think at least, or create something truly profound and unique and share that with this world and make the world a better place, hopefully, as a result of it. So that's kind of, I think, a lot of people's goal, right, is this self-transcendence. So first, you want this self-actualization, this, finding oneself and realizing it out there in the world and living it. And then a step beyond that, and the final step in, what's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is human needs. At the end of it is self-transcendence. And that's where we become something more, something larger than ourselves. I think everyone's aspiration and goal at a fundamental level at the end of the day. And so reading 2 to 3 hours every day and learning every day is how I achieve that, how I get towards that and closer to that goal, or living that goal on a daily basis, where I'm continually in a position of service to the world and to the people around me, because that's very fulfilling for anyone. Honestly, it's a feeling of gratitude. It makes you feel very alive and very grateful, helping others. And so I do that, reading 2 to 3 hours every day, self-development largely, and then also various other subject areas related to my own personal interest and development. So for example, most recently, chaos theory, edge of chaos theory, strange attractors, self-defined point of criticality. It's all this crazy quantum physics stuff. It's pretty fun. And so I've been relating that to actually the human mind, because the universe and the human mind are actually very remarkably similar on a rough level. They're roughly similar. There's also like the same number of neurons, almost neuron connections in our brain as there are galaxies within our universe, which is really weird to think about. And the kind of further evidence, right, of this kind of design of the universe, so to speak. And also this idea that I've mentioned earlier, or that I've touched upon, which is how, the universe and our mind mirror each other. And so that's why like what you live and what you put out is what you get. And so
you project.
That's why yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Projection and reflection are very, very real. The universe is a reflection and we are projections. Very metaphysical today. Yeah. And so then the second question, to answer your second question, is how do we achieve that, right? The second step, right? Once we get past self-knowledge, self-discipline, how do we distill just this simple phrase, self-discipline, right? Because everyone has a general idea of what that looks like, but all too often I see people try to they always stumble upon it. Self-discipline is honestly not complex. It looks exactly the same for every single person. People should not get caught up on trying to enact self-discipline in their own lives on an individual level until they've mastered the fundamental part first. And that is the task management. That is all about task management. And so what that takes in terms of a form is a task management app, because we're already using our phones all the time. We're using computers all the time. We need something that can live within those ecosystems as well, so that we build a habit out of it. And because if we're constantly using these devices throughout our lives already, we need something that will be there as well. And so that it's easily accessible and it becomes a habit within itself that's baked into our mind on a subconscious basis at an instinctual level. And so the one that I use in particular is called Todoist. We can, if in the show notes, we can include my referral link if you want.
Sure. I've used the one and it's working for me. So it is definitely something I want to endorse.
Yeah, exactly.
It changed my life. And that's why I'm actually really happy we're falling on this topic already. Task management. Yeah.
Yeah. Task management is really important. And so knowing that first is you're already going to be ahead of the pack. If you know this and you act on this knowledge, knowing that task management is the key, and time management as a result, productivity, right? Self-discipline. So self-discipline is all about how you use your day, right? Carpe diem, live like it's your last. Do what's actually meaningful to you and live your life oriented around that. So if it was your last day on earth, how are you going to do it? How are you going to live it? Are you going to do it? Are you going to spend it with your family? Is that what's most important to you? There you go. That speaks to your values, right? So, or are you going to do it doing something like this? Are you going to be podcasting at 7 a.m. on your very last day on this earth? I don't know. I might be. If it's my last day, probably I'll still just treat it like any other day, honestly, doing what I do best, which is just being myself and sharing myself with the world.
Your knowledge.
So, yeah, exactly. And so having the self-discipline to do that is really important. And so that comes out through task management and time management through said task management. Once you know that task management is important, you need to learn how to actually do it. And that's all about task prioritization. There's a very good method to doing that. It's called swallowing the frog or eating the frog. And so that's where you do your most difficult task first. And so I have delved and dived so deep into task management that that's only just one way to look at it. And so I actually like to integrate a second opposite way of looking at that into that first. And so instead of doing your most difficult task and your biggest task first, when you have the most energy to do it, yes, you should absolutely do that. But what you should do right before that is a very, very small, very, very, very small, simple task first, so that you feel like you've accomplished something right at the beginning of your day. And so this is actually something that I learned through the ADHD readings online that I've done. And so I've combined this kind of learnings from the ADHD community with the productivity community. And I find this to work the best on a daily basis for me personally, is where I do something really easy first every single day. And that's probably, I guess, why I automatically just instinctually gravitated towards reading every single morning. So I'll wake up like full of energy. I'm a morning person. Sorry, everyone out there that relies on coffee. I'm the weirdo that wakes up full of energy, but I burn all of it up like by 2 p.m. every day. That's my weakness, right? I burn very bright, so I burn very fast. So I guess I have a fast metabolism in that regard. And so having that self-discipline through task management is really important. Prioritizing your tasks in that way where you do a small one first and then you do your big one right after, right at the beginning of every day, really carries forward the momentum each day, because then you feel like you've gotten a lot done, and you have, because you've done not just a small task right off the bat, you've done this really big task as well right after. And so you want to structure your day also around like your chronotype, which is kind of, I guess, considered somewhat of a pseudoscience, but honestly, pseudosciences are half truths essentially, right? So there is truth within a lot of pseudoscience because it's based off of human observation of patterns. And so this is some guy's observation of a survey of a lot of people, and he's developed what's called chronotypes. And so it's important to also structure your day around your personal chronotype, which is basically like your own kind of natural circadian rhythm somewhat, which is your sleep pattern. So you should be structuring your day and your work and the type of work, most importantly, around when your energy kind of coincides with it. So you want your energy to really correlate with the type of work that you're doing and the type. So like if you want to be going into that deep creative work, that deep mindset, you want to do it with probably as much energy as possible, because using that, creative energy, connecting these concepts, innovating, like we said, integrating, which is integrating these like vast amount of concepts that you learned and then putting something out there into the world. Creative energy like that takes a lot. And so doing that when you've got the most energy is important. And so you want to structure your day around something like that, so that you're doing your deep work when you have the most energy required for it, and focus as well, because focus requires energy, right? This is expenditure of mental energy. This is like electricity. This is production of heat. This is you actually like burning off calories. And so you're like, and nutrients. And so you're like burning and you're using this up, and you need to be very mindful of how you do it. And so you want to be optimal in that approach towards this. And so you want to structure your day and your work around your chronotype. You want to do an easy task and then a hard one right at the beginning of your, like whatever your ideal optimal energy window is. So, that's okay this is why, remote work and this onset of remote work, this phenomenon has been so great, because people have learned how to hopefully, or they've ran into at least the struggle of creating a personal schedule. And it's actually a very valuable skill, because you can optimize your work even if you're within an office like context, right? You can still do this on a daily basis within an office context. You can structure your day in such a way that you can fit in, these daily goals and these daily habits on a daily basis. You just got to learn how to orient your life and what you do on a daily basis around that. And that's through task management and time management combined with mindfulness, right? And being mindful and intentional of that approach to all of this. If you're intentional in how you're living and how you're executing your lifestyle on a daily basis, then you're pretty much living your authentic truth and you're set. You figured out the secret to success and to life, honestly. That's what most people are really honestly striving for when they think what's missing in their lives. It's not this financial, it's not this material gap or void in their lives. And most of the time it's a spiritual one, honestly. It's a more profound kind of sense of not having, not loss, or they might have had it. Actually, a lot of times it's loss as well through like childhood, right? And this programming and conditioning that you get through life. So you have to learn how to unlearn a lot of that through your own methods, and self-discipline is the vehicle for doing that.
Yeah. I think the tricks you mentioned, like you start a small task and then a bigger task. I read something about habit stacking. So right now I'm in a phase of my life where I'm literally trying out different things, what works best for me. I just figured out my chronotype is a bear. So I'm kind of normal. Like I wake up slowly and then I get more productive and then I slow down in the evening. most people I think do. You're different. You shine bright in the morning and then in the evening you slow down. So I'm trying to understand this more. And this is actually recommended by my mentor, Werner. He mentioned that, like, okay, figure out your sleep patterns first. And then the first step is actually sleep well, get enough sleep. No matter when you work best or what, sleep is the first step towards all of that. I've been sampling a lot of things. As you mentioned, some of your tricks I've tried as well, but it's a journey for a lot of people. I think it's to figure out what works best for you. And Wes, have you ever been to school? Beyond secondary?
Yeah, I went to a private university in San Diego. It was called University of San Diego, or USD for short.
Okay. And what did you follow there?
I have a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies.
So I wanted to ask, like, especially because you're right all about learning, are you happy you went to university now, that opposed to what you're doing now? Was it worth going, or do you see value in that?
Well, just like anything else, honestly, in life, really, right? It's what you make of it. So, right, what you put out is what you get back. The same is the amount of like effort and intention that you put in in any area or time of your life, you will get back a requisite amount usually, right? It's kind of like the law of thermodynamics, right? So that right there in motion, just like that, it works the same way in university. So I would say, with that said, I think it was worth it. I had invaluable experiences during my time there, both in and outside, especially of the classroom itself. So that's the real value of university. If you really maximize the value of it, you really take advantage of it, is by using everything that you have at your disposal when you're there, like at both like the student level and at a personal level. And so that's like knowing what you want. This is why knowing what you want, doing all this personal development work earlier is better. The earlier you do it, the better off you'll be in life, because you'll have such a huge head start compared to everybody else. All the people you see out there building personal brands, like especially like Gen Z, who are like teenagers and stuff, they've already like somewhat figured this out, or at least live it on an instinctual level. Perhaps it just comes more naturally to them. Luckily, take them as an example and follow that, honestly. Yeah.
I see more and more that the people I talk to, and just the few that did go to university or study, it's indeed about the whole experience of it rather than the actual whatever you learned there. Because I went to uni, I dropped out, but I think the experiences I had there were more valuable than what I was actually learning there. Obviously, because I didn't pursue it. Yeah, it's 100% still recommended in a way. Is it worth it in the end of the day or not? It's so hard to value an experience at certain levels. The next question I want to ask you is, because you're following a path that is actually never ending. You want to get better every day. You want to know more every day. So are you happy right now where you are on your path in the story that you're writing? Or are you working towards a point where you can say, okay, then I'll be happy?
Yeah, I would say I'm content with where I am, as well as who I am, and who and what I have in my life right now. And that is something I've actually cultivated, right? Getting to this point of contentment is an achievement, and it's one that is acquired through practice. And so it's really important to practice that, getting contentment out of life, especially on a daily basis or in a grand scale as well. When we talk about looking at my life and where I'm at, where I think I should be, I would remove that word entirely from the equation in the first place. And that would be one big step towards becoming more content, is not comparing myself with others. And that way you have this idea of I am where I am, basically. And where I am is where I'm meant to be, essentially, because that's where I am. It's kind of this like tautology, or like this truism, right? It's this kind of like endless loop, this infinite loop, because it's kind of really grounding in that regard, right? But also profound. And at the same time, Because if you achieve this kind of idea of contentment, not complacency, mind you, contentment, and that's just like this kind of internal like security and knowing that's somewhat related to happiness, I suppose, or inner kind of pleasure, I guess, like this inner sense of stability. And that's really, I guess, balance at the end of the day. It's a feeling. Balance is a feeling, right? Of everything being in its right place. If correct me if I'm wrong, it's a feeling. And I think that's it. And it's like where everything just feels right. It's like that kind of sense of feng shui, but in a life sense, in a grander sense, and in an internal sense. It's this internal feng shui where everything is where it should be. And so if you have that internal knowing, and you'll have contentment. And so if you like kind of repeat this to yourself, I guess kind of a sense of like an affirmation, right? An affirmation statement. It's like, I am where I am and I am where I'm meant to be. It kind of makes you feel a little bit better, because I mean, that is really the reality of the situation. It's also a form of accepting reality, which is really important so that we don't kind of fall victim to anxiety avoidance cycles, which are really easy and, everywhere around us, like landmines, honestly, throughout your day and throughout life. It's very easy to get trapped in these kind of negative feedback loops because of this reflective nature of the universe. And if we kind of get stuck in kind of a negative mindset or a negative emotional state, the universe will start to look like that too. I'm rambling, but it's still important, because I guess it's important also because I to relate it back to contentedness or contentment, where I want to be in my career path or my life. So you don't want to compare yourself to something else. And so that's why it's important to kind of just stick to your path, observe others, take bits and pieces from theirs. Like I said, with that patchwork quilt that I talked about, that you cover yourself in as kind of like, let's call it a superhero cape, so to speak.
So did you go through life comparing yourself with others before? Has that been a lesson or a process to get through?
Definitely. Yeah. And so there's my guidance for people. There's my mentorship is don't do this. Don't fall for these same mistakes, because it's very, very easy. And it's all related to self-talk in your head, and which is related to, other people, because self-talk, right? The voice that we hear in our heads, it's not our own, it's our ego. And our ego is just an amalgamation or a combination of all the different voices that we've heard, that we've internalized throughout our lives, whether it's our parents, our siblings, both older and younger, other family members, relatives, media. So any sort of authoritative entity or person in our life, that makes up our ego usually. So all the shoulds that you hear in your head that you tell yourself, all the can'ts, all these self-limiting beliefs, as they're called, that you have swirling around in your head, they're not actually your own. They're other people's projections that you have actually internalized and are now instead mistaking for reflections on yourself. And so that's like where, if, I've been called like an idiot or stupid at certain points throughout my life, and I internalize that, if that happens at a young enough age, that constitutes childhood trauma. And this becomes a cycle that repeats itself throughout our lives. And that's what trauma actually is not what happened to you. It's what results. And this is the cyclical nature of it. And so until you actually deal with it and get through it and allow yourself to feel those feelings and break past these self-limiting beliefs that you have upon yourself, and where you actually like recognize within yourself where these voices are coming from. And this requires a lot of self-work. Like I'm talking about this as if it's something so simple, right? This idea of enlightenment, of balance, it's not a point in time. It's not a fixed point. It is a state, and it's a state of mastering like the art of balance. The balance is an action, right? It's motion. Balance is being in motion at all times. And in reality, this is in being in motion with the universe and being in flow with it. So balance, or resilience in this sake, to help you not compare yourself to other people, which is what you need, right? You need resilience to not do that. You need self-discipline to not do that. You need self-discipline to keep these blinders, right? Like a horse, to keep yourself on that path, on your path, and to only take those little patches and put them on your little quilt cape instead of letting it become something that drags you down or leads you astray off of your own path, because we each have our own path in life and it's completely unique to ourselves. There is no one right path from someone else that is right for us. We have to create that for ourselves. There will always be little bits and pieces that are missing that we have to fill ourselves through life experience and through inner wisdom. And that's through learning.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it's very interesting. Balance it's multiple things through, and it's funny, balance has been coming up in the last few episodes a few times. For you, it's a feeling, and I totally agree with that, as it's so relative. Balance for someone, if you take one situation that is balanced for someone but not for the other one, and then balance is you according to the universe and how you place yourself into it. That's very interesting. Now, I had one thing though. You keep saying like, okay, and that's back, don't listen to the noise, look at your own path. And that's for people who are way back, let's say in the start of their self-development process. How do you find your path? Is that again to the mentor, but you still need to find your own values? So that's like all the way from the beginning. How can you find your own path, your own values and everything to start growing with the mentor, with following the right path?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, I mentioned it before even thinking about having a mentor at all. It has nothing to do with having a mentor. It would be values first. Mm-hmm. So defining your values and prioritizing them. So you need to know, because you definitely need to have like an inner circle of values, and that would be like your compass. And so that's how you guide your decisions that you make in life. And then also recognizing your strengths. So that would be next. So like your top 10 values, your top 10 strengths, knowing these and really internalizing them and orienting your decisions in life around them. And so that includes like your decision in terms of your vocation, what you choose to do in order to make money and make a living in this world needs to be oriented around both those values and those strengths. Yeah. And then in terms of mentors, once we start to get towards the realm of mentors, I would say next would be defining or choosing your heroes. So choose like 3 to 5 maybe heroes based off of your values. And so if these people embody your values through their work or through their teachings or through their sayings, that's a good thing. And so choose them as your heroes, whether they're contemporary or ancient. It doesn't matter at what point in time these people existed, or even whether they're honestly real or not. If they're like fictional characters and they embody some sort of value that's really important to you, then that's perfectly fine saying they're your hero. I mean, that's why superheroes exist, right? So I mean, that I would put Iron Man as one of my heroes because I really value intelligence and this pursuit of intelligence and innovation and always pushing the envelope in that regard a lot. And so does Iron Man. And that's why he creates himself a suit of armor. And I think that's a really fantastic story of creativity, especially in times of need and crisis, when we're in that cave, right? And we emerge from it with a suit of armor and fly off, like defeating enemies. I think that's a pretty fantastic story.
Yeah,
exactly. And we're using our strengths, and that's our values. The only reason why he was able to do that is because he remembered his strengths in that cave. He's like, wait a second, I can do this, right? Right. And having that moment where you tell yourself that, it might never happen if you get caught up in all this noise before that, right? Of this conditioning and programming that society and media and your friends and family have laid upon you. So if you aren't able to get to that point in the first place, you're never going to get out of that cave like Iron Man did. And we want everyone to achieve that. And so in order to do that, you have to know your values and you need to know your strengths in order to get out from the muck, from the swamp
of the world, the noise in the world.
Exactly.
This is actually
forward.
A really good summary of the path of self-development. Because I think for a lot of people, it's still such a vague concept, self-help, self-development. And I think this pretty much sums up like the first steps you can take towards a better self. I have a few more questions for you. to where you are right now, who has been big influences in your life that shaped you the way you are right now?
So when I was younger, I've been called a rebel multiple times throughout my life. I've been very headstrong or stubborn as well. So I'll always do like what I want and what I think is best and what I know is best. And thus I learn, by doing. I'm a kinesthetic learner through and through. So I learn through my own mistakes as well as an extension of that. And so when I was very young, I was a very precocious, child and hard to deal with and like, an influence. And so my environment had little influence on what I did when I was very young. But then I, became a lot more influenced by my dad in particular throughout my life when I was younger in terms of like way of thinking a lot and being as well. It wasn't, which is undoubtedly a part of who I am. Don't get me wrong, right? We all have undeniable parts of our parents within us, both good and bad. My own self growth and development journey though is very much so centered around unlearning a lot of that. And becoming a lot more in touch with like who I really am, which is like being much more in touch with my feelings and other people's feelings as an extension of that, or really in touch with other people's feelings first and then in touch with my own feelings afterwards was really the way my path took, ironically, because it was one through codependency, an undoing of codependency. The influence became less and less over time as well as I returned closer and closer to my like true self, my true nature. And so now I'm much more like forging my own path in life and then hoping that it's one that lasts long enough for some others to follow as well. So I hope that path that I forge towards like a sense of balance in this, chaos and struggle that is life. I hope it stays lit for some other people for a while and that it's a valid one for at least some other people. So I hope some other people find some sort of like sense of comfort, I suppose, and balance in at least practicing some of what I preach, I suppose. Yeah, not much influence, honestly. And that's very much been my journey, is one of authenticity. It's my number one core value is authenticity. And number two is honesty.
That's great. That's actually very interesting to hear, especially after speaking to a few people and then hearing this. It's very interesting. But has there been life events or emotional events or any other obstacles in your life that shaped the way you are right now?
Yeah, I've experienced a variety of chronic trauma throughout my life, both in the far and recent past, actually. They definitely, I allowed them to shape like who I was for a little while. Definitely. These events at first influenced my thoughts and my feelings. However, they no longer have the hold on me that they once did after, thanks to therapy and all of this personal development though, as well, that I've been doing outside of that on my own before, during, and after that. And this is why mindfully cultivating resilience in that way, like through our own practice on an individual level through learning, is important. This is why it's so important to do that each day. This is another thing that a lot of people have a misconception about. Resilience is not creating an armor. We're not constructing an armor like Iron Man in this case, right? This is not innovation. We're talking about resilience here. And so resilience in this sense is much more like what Bruce Lee says, right? Like having to be like water, because we want to learn how to flow with life, not fight against it. Because the more we fight against life, the more we fight against the energy that the universe throws at us, the more we expend our own energy as a result. Mm-hmm. And so we have both a finite amount of energy that we're born with, and we have a finite amount also within a daily context on a daily level and based off of our diet as well, right? What we're eating, what we're doing on a daily basis. Are we making space for ourselves for play? Are we making space for ourselves for R&R, rest and relaxation? Are we making space for like intention and creation, that kind of work, so that we have this sense of purpose and this sense of routine and cycle in our life, so that we have some sort of like grounding? It's really important to be mindful of that and cultivate that. And this is what resilience really is at the end of the day, is when you have those practices, it's really important to stick with them, especially in times of great need or great strife or chaos, that's when they become even more important. These are really anchors in those times, in those storms in your life. So if you have some sort of practice to hold on to that keeps you grounded in reality, that really helps you keep going. And that's a support network as well. And so you need to cultivate this mindfully. It's on you, the individual, you, the self, to cultivate this within you and with around you in the form of support network and in the form of resilience.
Cool. That's very interesting. So are there right now any obstacles that holding you back of reaching your full potential or of reaching your daily goals?
No, not really. Honestly, the only person holding me back is myself at the end of the day. And the very few others out there who seek to take advantage of me. I hope that the world has learned by now not to do that, at least people out there, because those who do always usually pay for it in some way or another, whether directly or indirectly. Yeah, there's not much out there stopping me from doing what I want nowadays, which is good. It's very freeing. And I look forward to what the future holds as a result of that.
That's awesome. What is success for you?
Okay. So success to me would be a combination of basically having like a desired job title. So whatever that is on an individual level. So job title, salary, some sort of salary that I feel is indicative of the value that I have out there, or something that also would supply me with the type of lifestyle that I feel content with or feel comfortable with. And those honestly only make up like 10% each. So the job title and the salary each. So 20% total of what this success picture looks like. And then we have liking what I do, having an actual passion for my work. So that's really important. That's like 20%. And then having free time, that would be another 20%. So that's to do whatever I want. So that's where I'm doing that learning, right? That I mentioned about like chaos theory and edge of chaos theory and learning quantum physics in my free time just because I can and I have the time to. Finally, mental health. I would also say spiritual health and emotional health as a part of that. So mental, emotional, spiritual health, 20%. And then also physical health, final 20%.
Yeah.
So that's what success looks like. And having a balance between all of those. That's the actual success. So not just having features of those.
Yeah. I love how I think analytically as well. And I just love how that is broken down. And indeed, there's a good balance in that, honestly. Actually, I guess for a lot of people, they can use the same topics almost, but then it changes the percentages a lot. Like people want more money, or 40% of what they do in life is about the money they make. And I think it comes also with education about like yourself, but education of like, when are you really happy? Yeah, that's very cool to see, actually. I had more questions about if you have more recommendations on how people can self-improve them, books, tools. I think we covered a lot of that, but do you have any specific books or tools that people can use to read, to learn, to improve themselves? Besides Todoist, that was a big one.
Yeah. So my number one tip, and to define it as the number one thing you can do, if you could take away anything from this conversation today, dear listeners, start first by defining and prioritizing your values. And then your next step is making every single other decision from there in your life based off of those values, specifically the top 10.
Yeah. And if people really have no idea how to get started on finding their values, how would you go about that?
So there's a personal values quiz. That's how I did it online. It makes you choose from a pool of like 50, I think, different values, which is pretty much covering all of them, honestly. There was a lot. And so the more you choose, the bigger your pool is individually that you have to choose from, where it pits each value head to head against each other, like a tournament style, basically face off until you have a pyramid basically of values.
Okay.
And so you have like just this nice, neat little ladder of values in prioritized order as a result. And so I picked 41. And so it took me a long time to get through all of them because I was I thought very hard and felt very hard as well. Like felt and thought through each of these values when I had to pit them head to head because I've never done something like this before. Everyone else I've had do it has done it so much faster, but I took my time with it. I don't know.
It's important, it's like, it's your values. It's what,
exactly. Like I
for.
wasn't planning on revisiting this anytime soon. Like this was a very monumental kind of moment for me. So I'm like, okay. And so it took me like a few hours and I did it over like the course of a whole day.
Wow.
And then I defined them. And so that's through this website and it's like called Personal Values. And so if you just type in on Google Personal Values quiz, just look for the website that's Personal Values and it has a bullet dot period somewhere in that word. And that's the one. You'll know it when you see it.
I'll probably link that below.
Yeah, you can link it in the show notes.
In the show notes, indeed. What are your short, mid, and long-term plans as of now?
So mine are all really like about locations, really, I suppose. That's my only plans that I have right now. Now that I found my work, my short-term plan is to return to Vietnam. Mid-term plan is Bali. Long-term plan is unclear in terms of location. I'd like to eventually spend some time down in Kyoto, though. Some downtime in Kyoto when I'm older. And so like just throughout this whole time, no matter where I'm at, really honestly, in this world, I intend now to continue my work within the realm of personal development. This will take the form of a podcast in the short term and blog and monthly email newsletter. And then in the longer term or midterm rather, ebook, course, and long-term, probably one-on-one and group coaching. And eventually I really want to even do like retreat style, probably events in Bali, I would say, even honestly, ideally, it's pretty fantastic out there. It's a really ideal location for this kind of stuff too.
That's cool. That's actually
spiritual.
What my job was before COVID. I was filming these events all over the world. So that was actually what inspired me of collecting all the knowledge because I was meeting all these speakers, self-development coaches, self-development speakers, audiences of few hundred going to a few thousands to tens of thousands. So it was very inspiring to be in that environment. And that was just one of the triggers to start and collect all the good, juicy knowledge that people have. When you're that far, I want to come and film yours.
Hopefully one day.
Yeah, 100%. Do you have one favorite quote or saying you go by?
Yeah, from I guess you could call him somewhat Western philosopher. He was like from Turkey, but he's also like considered a Greek philosopher at the same time, pre-Socratic, so before Socrates. And he was alive around the same time actually as the Buddha, apparently, which I found out only recently. I drew that parallel, which was really interesting to me because they say a few similar things. The name of this philosopher is Heraclitus or Heraclitus, however you like to pronounce it. And the quote goes, "The only constant in life is change." That's my favorite quote. This is my favorite philosopher because he's like this bridge, like I see myself as, between Eastern and Western philosophy. And so what he says is also very similar to what comes from the Tao Te Ching, which is Taoism, which is ancient Chinese philosophy. And so that's a quote from the author, the so-called author of that book is Lao Zhu or whatever. My pronunciation's horrible. And he says basically, stay within like the center of the circle and, you know, all things will pass basically, or something like that. And it's all about balance. And, you know, no matter what's going on, basically knowing that, you know, balance is the key to everything. change is always going to be happening. There will always be that storm going on around you. The key is to staying within the center, within that, within the eye of the storm, whereas that center of that storm is calm, right? Within the center of the storm of life is balance. And that's what we should always be striving for. And so a specific translation of the Tao Te Ching that I recommend is by Stephen Mitchell. And so this is a really small book. It's like a pocketbook, honestly, almost. It's very short and to the point, yet its words evoke meaning much deeper than it seems. So it's a very, very transcendental book in that regard. When you read it, the words are very, very powerful. They're so short, yet so eloquent because it's written in poetic prose originally. It's a very poetic kind of writing format. And Stephen Mitchell, with this specific translation, does a fantastic job of evoking that. And so I really recommend everyone that's looking for a better sense of balance in their lives to read this book and study this philosophy a little bit, this Taoism, and also ancient Greek philosophy. There's a lot to be learned there in both ancient Chinese and ancient Greek philosophy, in both, so ancient Eastern and Western philosophy. So much knowledge. Also Stoicism, that's another extension of Western ancient philosophy, another great school of thought for maintaining balance and resilience in the face of this world.
Nice. Well, cool. Thank you so much. It was actually a very enlightening conversation, even more so than the ones we've been having lately. And definitely more conversations to come, I reckon. Where can the people follow you the best, or when all your knowledge or output, where can people follow you the best?
Yeah, so my content creation will start picking up within the next 3 months or so. So you can follow me around the internet on various social platforms by searching the username @the Wes Jackson.
The Wes Jackson. I'll definitely link the most common ones like Instagram and Facebook. And then from there on, we'll follow your various channels in the future.
I am most active on Facebook, I will mention.
Yeah. I keep watching your stories all the time. Awesome. This was actually really, really good. Thank you so much. I'm actually very curious to your own podcast soon. Well, thanks. And till the next time.
See you next time.